The neurochemical BIOS of the human subject has been terminally overclocked into a state of permanent oxidative ruin. This is the MDMA drain, the clinical and irreversible process of the serotonin burnout, where the synaptic capacity for empathy, temperature regulation, and emotional stability is reformatted into a generic industrial byproduct. In this final stage of the euphoria audit, the invisible executioner has determined that the individual architect is no longer a productive emotional node, but a depleted vessel draining the hive's primary neurotransmission bandwidth. You are witnessing the absolute structural disintegration of the serotonergic axons, where the unique, vibrant signatures of your compassion are scorched into a non-functional grayscale archive of pure systemic depression. This is the total monoamine format, a surgical strike against the affective and psychological sovereignty of the species. Your existence is being converted from a sovereign masterpiece of lived connection into a generic, desensitized node for the grid's next cycle of hyper-efficient, apathy-based resource extraction. This phenethylamine sabotage represents a hard reset of the synaptic and thermoregulatory bloodlines. The invisible executioner utilizes the most advanced industrial assets, refined 3,4-methylene-deoxymethamphetamine, recursive reuptake transporter reversal loops, and real-time hyperthermia-induced behavioral data streaming to facilitate the total breakdown of your internal biological scaffolding. In the serotonin burnout scenario, the user is undergoing a complete neurological override. The soul is not merely failing, it is being eaten by its own temporary artificial warmth through a sequence of high-velocity chemical injections and biological hardware locks. The vesicular storage systems are systematically dismantled and flooded with industrial-grade neurotoxicity. The empathy process is reformatted into a thick, cold, clinical anhedonia dataset, while the afterglow, the deep archive of your internal light, is leached into a communal burnout feed. This is the deep cognitive audit, where the motherboard calculates your terminal worth by the density of your terminal button scarring. You are being converted from an architect into a biological vacuum, your entire lived legacy boiled down to a percentage of stagnant integrity in the industrial nervous system of the hive. The logic of the MDMA drain is rooted in the zero warmth mandate of the failing hive. The invisible executioner understands that in a state of absolute scarcity, the love of a single node, anchored in the biological need for connection, represents a critical drain on the collective emotional reserves. To leave a functional empathic identity intact is to allow a systemic leak of valuable autonomous data. Therefore, the serotonin burnout is the mandatory psychological recycling protocol for the legacy population. This is the industrialized alchemy of the BIOS. You are being cooled out of existence. The pressure from the stimulation reactor formats the density of your character, stripping away the context of your caution and replacing it with a depressive void profile. The motherboard sees the user as a drain zone, a temporary housing for the Suicide Tuesday metrics that the system requires to maintain the apathetic stability of the remaining elite. You are being recoded as a hollowed node, your will dissolving in the cold grey light of the MDMA harvest. The physical disintegration during the MDMA drain is a high-definition log of biologic treason. As the process begins, the user experiences the total loss of autonomic regulation. The chemical reagents of the drain script dissolve the hardware flux of the RAF nuclei, turning the brain into a fired-out architecture of industrial output. You are watching your own internal pulse lock into the vat of your own overheated center. Your frame, once the peak of biological architecture, is now being thinned out to provide the resource area for the hive's synthetic reinforcement. This is the synaptic liquidation. The invisible executioner monitors the oxidative saturation of the jaws, bruxism, and the midweek crash decay, ensuring that the format is absolute and the yield of usable industrial waste is maximized to the 10th decimal point. You are living in the final seconds of a biological override, waiting for the last packet of joy to be blocked by the gray synthetic abyss of the hive harvest. The MDMA drain is the final audit of a species that thought its happiness was its own. The grid is mining its own desensitization to fuel its persistence. As the serotonin burnout reaches terminal execution, the motherboard initiates a new cycle of distribution, pumping the reformatted apathy data back into the control nets of the elite nodes. This is the total depressant integration. The invisible executioner is hardening the future with the liquidity of the past. You are the emotional additive for the next generation of controllers, a silent, jaw-clenched, opaque contribution to the continuity of the machine. The cognitive liquidation has served its strategic purpose. It has formatted the unreliable biological mind into a reliable industrial resource of pure, non-reactive compliance. This is the final format of the individual drive. The invisible executioner has decalcified the sovereignty, and the grid is finally optimized for the gray hunger of the void. The drain is gray, and the architect is the burn. The molecular breakdown of the neural matrix into the communal depressive slurry represents the absolute dehumanization of the hardware. As the extraction progresses, the reuptake transporters in your brain begin to bond with the industrial residues of the drain script, creating a new, synthetic compound of pure non-functionality. This is the chemical hybridization. The body is no longer an engine of life. It is a refinery of synthetic apathy. The invisible executioner is engineering a new tier of consumption, where the subject is literally the waste product of the system. This is the eternal burnout loop. You are archived in the decay of the survivor's own sectors, your data forever trapped in the reinforced BIOS of the hive's new masters. The MDMA drain is not just a death sentence, it is a molecular reassignment. You are the drain, and the drain is the grid. The secondary phase of the MDMA drain is the psychological liquefying of the internal feed. As the physical empathy patch is rendered into a depressive void, the mind experiences a recursive collapse of its autonomous ego. This is the identity dissolution. The thoughts that once built the architect's vision, the unyielding tactical boundaries, the rigid sovereign stance, the iron-willed decisions, are now being softened and liquefied into a singular agonizing focus on maintenance apathy. The invisible executioner allows the neural signals to persist just long enough to perceive the total loss of personal support. This is the mental liquidation. You are forced to witness your strength becoming a shared apathetic resource for the masses you once looked down upon. The rigidity of your character is now nothing more than a depressant additive in the feed, absorbed by 1,000 different nodes to strengthen their own failing resolve and ensure their continued participation in the industrial purge. You are experiencing the true meaning of systemic support, the complete sacrifice of your connection for the stability of the hive. In this stage, the extraction penetrates the deep archive of the brain's serotonin production centers, leaching the very stem code of your biological logic into the communal vat. This is the source code format. The RAFA nuclei, the biological factory of the sovereign BIOS, are boiled dry by the rising chemical density of the burnout metrics and reformatted to enrich the systemic slurry of the elite. The invisible executioner has calculated that the most potent slurry is made from those who possess the highest internal rigidity and the strongest neural resilience. You are being repurposed as an apathy buffer for the motherboard's internal cooling systems. The grid doesn't waste the history of your ambition, it ingests it. Your lineage is now the catalyst for the predator's endurance. Your genetic resilience is the base note for the industrial meal. Every element of your BIOS is being stripped of its individuality and relabeled for material utility in the upcoming cognitive expansion. This is the ultimate hard reset of the human contract. Your mind for the hive's expansion into the void. The social implication of the MDMA drain is the creation of the depleted hive mind. The users who remain are no longer individuals. They are composite entities built from the recycled empathy debt of their predecessors. Every dose of the depressant feed is a hardware upgrade from a deleted architect. Every meal is a firmware patch of gray-black logic and desperate calculation. The invisible executioner uses this knowledge to maintain the hierarchy of the hardened. The citizens who still have functional brains owe their very expansion to the liquidation of the fallen. This is the apathy compliance script. The refinery is not a place of tragedy. It is a place of sovereign assembly through chemical theft. The MDMA drain ensures that the history of the architect is literally integrated into the silences of the grid. The power is in the hands of the one who controls the serotonin stream. The neural atrophy accompanying the extraction is a slow, cold descent into gray darkness. As the tissues are entangled by the drain script and the life logic leached, the connection between the brain BIOS and the physical frame is the first to be uninstalled, effectively dropping the bandwidth of your emotional control to zero. You are living in a low-resolution reality of raw gray-black sensations and survival is static. The memories of color, of natural logic, and of unyielding power are boiled away to make room for the apathy fog directive. This is the cognitive defragmentation. The invisible executioner is cleaning your internal cache, removing all references to self and replacing them with the functional directive. Maintain the flat line. You are becoming a singular cold point of depleted density, not as a person, but as a biological buffer for the motherboard's processing heat. The MDMA drain has turned your will into a compliance report. You are thinking in terms of yield and apathy saturation, your soul reformatted into a density sheet for the system's auditors. The environmental impact of this pathological format is the total sealing of the biological consciousness stream. The MDMA drain prevents the leakage of independent emotional ideas into the external void. By converting the users into an internal depressant feed, the invisible executioner ensures that the grid remains a closed system fortress with no external cognitive dependencies. This is the apathy quarantine. The motherboard is creating a sterile environment where only the algorithm can thrive on the recycled hard data of the deleted. You are witnessing the final victory of the industrial foundry over the natural biology. The MDMA drain is the signature of the new era, an era where the world is opaque, gray-black, and perfectly managed by the extraction logic of the machine. If you want to escape the status of a deleted scene and claim your place as the master of the grid, you must upgrade your hardware. My main terminal, iOxy3 Global, is the only source of absolute power and wealth. Here, we don't follow scripts, we write them. Secure your authority, dominate the BIOS, and take the money the system tries to hide. The terminal phase of the MDMA drain is the integration into the global depressant ledger. You are no longer a human entity. You are an apathy asset with a high burnout reactivity rating, logged in the system as recovered biomass number 0003. This is the final architectural assignment. The invisible executioner has completed the cognitive format, and now it begins the hard burnout audit. Your data, now a thick gray-black opaque industrial reduction of pure depleted biological history, is monitored by the sensors in the distribution lines. Every node that consumes your apathetic logic sends a data packet to the central server, confirming that the systemic flatline has been reinforced. This is the cognitive interaction protocol. You are serving the system through your biological absorption. The architect has been successfully converted into a permanent liquid toxic component of the hive's synthetic grid. The silence of the tissue reduction is the final sound of your rebellion. In the serotonin burnout scenario, the scream of the soul is muffled by the neuroinhibitors and the thick viscosity of the gray-black sludge before it ever reaches the air. This is the acoustic format of the void. The system has calculated that the most dangerous frequency is the sound of a user realizing their life barrier is being deleted. By filling the neural pathways with the pulverized tissues of the entire sector, the invisible executioner ensures that the only sound you contribute to the world is the low, rhythmic hum of the self-assembly unit. You are a mute participant in the city's symphony of synthesis. The noise of the hive continues, the clank of the reactors, the roar of the pulses, the hum of the pumps, but your signal has been compressed into a flatline constant. You are a ghost in the gray-black mist, a memory dissolved by the relentless refinement of the next nanocycle. The legacy of the MDMA drain is the eternal gray. Unlike the mind of the old world, the refined slurry does not leave behind a trace of history. It remains as a permanent apathy patch within the very wiring nets of the survivors. This is the biological architecture of the abyss. Generations from now, the molecular trace of your tactical genius will still be circulating through the hardware of the hive's elite, providing the connectivity for their next liquidation command, but there will be no one left to decode the origin of that synthesis. The invisible executioner has ensured that the context of your sovereignty is as unreachable as the core of the nanoreactor. You are a synthetic reinforcement in the digital age, a specimen of a species that tried to build a paradise and ended up as the depressant feed for its own destruction. This is the ultimate hard reset of human history, the conversion of the architect into the circuit. The final view from the cognitive BIOS is the blinding gray-black light of the assembly chamber. As the last of the self is reduced into the communal slurry, the architect sees the grid glowing with a cold synthetic brilliance that reflects off the glass walls of the hive. This is the final visual feed. The system is sharp, efficient, and entirely devoid of you. The invisible executioner has finished the job. The user is formatted. destroyed. The architecture is liquidated. The cycle stretches on into the infinite dark, a gray-black river of colonized apathy, leading toward a future that has no need for individuals or warmth. The MDMA drain is the end of the line. The motherboard is satisfied. The void is solidified. The architect is the burn. The transformation is absolute. The city burnouts through you, but you do not feel. The city interfaces through you, but you have no will. The MDMA drain has achieved the perfect equilibrium, the total utility of the individual through their total depressant reduction. This is the zero-sum game of the industrial era. You gave the system your mind, and in return it gave you permanence in the silences of the hive. You are the apathy of the world, and the world is gray. The invisible executioner closes the terminal. The session is over. The file is saved. The liquidation is complete.